Hi everyone! Well, been a while since I've done a video, huh? I've just been busy working on other stuff, but, what I'm doing isn't what you're here for. You're here for Be Kind My Neighbor! Ooh. Be Kind My Neighbor is a psychedelic horror/romance graphic novel written and illustrated by Yugo and published by Silver Sprocket. Keen eyes and frequenters of the channel may have picked up that this is not the first Yugo media we have covered, as they are a part of Limbo Lane, the creators of Smile For Me, and another upcoming game called Great God Grove. I'm so excited about it, and I can't wait to hopefully play it and experience with you guys, but that's beyond the point. I just finished Be Kind My Neighbor about a couple hours ago now, and I've written a few notes about it that I would love to share with you all. There will be two sections to this video, a spoiler-free review section and a more spoilery review section. The timestamps for the beginning of each review are here. I won't share all of the story beats and details in the spoiler review because I recommend those that can to read it for themselves, but I do have some stuff I want to say about the story that I cannot say without spoiling. Before I get into it, I want to add some trigger warnings for not only this book but for the review as well. This story is 18 plus, and while I will not go into detail on certain aspects, I want to make sure that there is still a warning for those who might be triggered by some of the aspects. To be honest, I don't know how the YouTube algorithm works for these words, or if I'll be blasted into the ether, but let's go. This review contains mentions of abusive relationships, murder, serial killers, and cults. Okay, I'm going to talk about some kind of random specifics of the book itself since I got the physical version. The pages feel nice, smooth, shiny, good page turn feel in my opinion. The book is also pretty chunky. It's almost 500 pages, and even if the book is paperback, it's still a hefty thing. The colors can be kind of dark if you're not in a well-lit area, since a lot of the colors are in the darker, warmer hues. But I think that it really fits the time period, and I'm also just a sucker for Yugo's style anyways. I think my biggest issue with this book is actually that there are no page numbers in sight. I know page numbers aren't necessary, but it just makes it easier if I wanted to source pages or talk about specific parts of the book by page number. However, that's my biggest issue with the book, and even that, it's a mild complaint. With that little tangent out of the way, let's start with the spoiler-free review. This will probably be shorter because it can be really difficult to explain much of the book without spoiling it. To sum the story up, it takes place in the early 70s and is about the main characters, Weg and Mr. Neighbor, who live in a small town called Baths, which has a serial killer on the loose called the Baths Heartbreaker. Weg is this funny little musician who swears up a storm, and Mr. Neighbor is, as one of the characters describes him, quote-unquote Mr. Effing Rogers. Both are unique in appearance. Weg has this big, oversized egg-shaped head, while Neighbor is made out of cloth and is basically a walking human-sized puppet. Both of them have their own secrets and pasts they are trying to move on from, and through meeting each other, they help each other grow and heal in their own sort of somewhat morbid way. Weg especially has his own closet filled with skeletons of his past, and has to come to terms with the trauma and how to fully break free of the regret and abuse that haunt him. I really like how this story handles Neighbor and Weg's relationship. I think they're really cute. I love how they communicate with each other, are clear about what is and what's not okay, and it's just really refreshing to see a queer romance like that. It is also really nice how Weg and Neighbor can be loving and in the open. Even if there was some implied transphobia in the flashback, Neighbor and Weg's gender and sexuality isn't really put into question, and is fully embraced and respected by those around them. Even mean characters that pick on them don't even mention these things as a point to put them down for either of the characters. However, if you're looking for a totally fluffy queer romance, this is definitely not the place for it. This comic is dark and has quite a bit of disturbing imagery that people who are squeamish might not like. And I can't really go into details, but the comic and webpage to order the book at store.silversprocket.net, link in the description, both have a trigger warning list that you might want to consider if you're curious about reading it. I can't really go into much without spoiling, but despite the dark nature, I really like the messages and themes of this book. The art is great, the character designs are great, so overall a very charming book, and I highly recommend for anyone who can take the book and are also old enough. Once again, this is an 18 plus book. I do not recommend or condone anyone who is under 18 to read this book, to take a look at it and also support the creator. Okay, those are all the things I have to say about it without spoiling too much. So now we're going to get into the spoiler-free section. So click away if you don't want to hear any spoilers. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, for those who are still here, hi! I'm either guessing you read Become My Neighbor and want to hear my thoughts about certain story beats, skipped ahead, or, I don't know, you like being spoiled on stuff? Either way, I'm going to be discussing some aspects that I really like about the book that are big spoilers. I'm also going to be discussing the end and my thoughts on the ending, so if you're not privy to that, you might want to read it first and then come back. Off you go. Alright then. In this story, it's revealed pretty early on that the Bath's heartbreaker is Mr. Neighbor, and is revealed later that Weg was cursed with an egg head by a cult he was once in. Yeah, no, that wasn't a joke. He has a giant egg for a head. I thought it was a stylistic thing, but it's very much a plot device. But because of this curse, every 35 days Weg has to die, otherwise his head will rot away and kill him permanently. However, he is reborn after he is killed before the 35-day mark. This leads for an interesting dynamic between the two. Mr. Neighbor has to kill because he has to make a ritual sacrifice for a cult every month. The cult worships this mysterious higher being called Lady Trudy, who seems to have given the cloth body to him, and has to make sacrifices so he can maintain that body and stay alive. With Weg around, Mr. Neighbor can kill Weg to keep both of them alive. It sounds really morbid because it is. It doesn't really show much of that aspect, but does show how it's done a couple times. I'm actually really happy with the direction this plot point took. Weg and Neighbor discuss how they, wrap up business, and Mr. Neighbor doesn't necessarily enjoy doing it, but is just doing it out of necessity. I was a little worried when I discovered Neighbor and Weg would have this dynamic because I've seen so much media where it uses a quote-unquote serial killer character as added flavor to the relationship, or to add an extra sense of danger to the partner, but it didn't really take that direction. It was just a relief. The characters in this were really charming as well. I actually really like Mr. Neighbor. He's probably my favorite currently. He has a lot of interesting, mysterious aspects about him that I find really cool. He self-describes as a bad person and implies that the reason Lady Trudy had him give her harsher sacrifices is because he was a not-so-great person in his pre-puppet body life. I was honestly so excited to learn more about his past, which kind of frustrates me because the book doesn't delve into that. It makes sense, Weg is the central character out of the two, but I still have such an itch for Mr. Neighbor lore. I doubt it'd happen, but I'd love a little mini spin-off origin story for him. I also enjoyed Weg's character. I liked his character development. He had a lot of growth and learned to accept his trauma in past relationships. Plus, he's just a delightful character all around. He plays off Neighbor well, and the sequences where he sings have a really fun visual style and are probably the visual highlight for me. I feel like a lot of his doubts in himself and struggles and accepting who he is and not letting his past tie him down really resonated with me, and the ending sequence made me feel really emotional because of it. I won't discuss that ending sequence too much in this video, because I think it's really impactful and it deserves to be read. As for minor characters, I like Tillman a lot. Very cute design, he's very charming and sweet. I liked Glenn, but only because the design is nice and not much else. I liked Tanny Fitzgerald, who's just a minor news reporter character, but the design is really cute and it just resonated with me. I think the last major point I want to bring up is the ending. I really liked it, but I had a big, major question, feel free to answer in the comments, that was opened up by the ending. The ending goes something like this. Weg is kidnapped by the cult who laid the curse upon him, using him as a sacrifice to summon their god. In retaliation, Lady Trudy basically erupts from Mr. Neighbor's body, kills most of the people within this cult, and had this big fight with the other summon god and wins, I think? While this happens, Weg has this inner monologue with himself as he learns to love himself and accept his trauma. As I said, it was a beautiful sequence. I don't think I could give it justice in a description. However, in this self-discovery, Weg revives and revives as his regular, human-headed self. My question is, what happens to Neighbor? He basically said he wouldn't kill anymore and he would only use Weg's blood since he couldn't die. But now Weg definitely doesn't have that power anymore, and Mr. Neighbor still has his puppet body. Does that mean he's going to continue the killing again? How would that affect their relationship? I personally interpreted Weg being reborn as both a literal and metaphorical rebirth. Since his form in the majority of the comic isn't sustainable, along with his mental state, With Mr. Neighbor in a similar situation and being in a body he wasn't in prior, it seems like his mental state isn't fully resolved either. However, it could also be interpreted that he is happy with the life he is in, which I would understand, minus the murdering people. I just feel like that left a bit more questions in the end, which I would happily discuss with others, unless I'm totally missing the point and something went extremely over my head. Discuss down below if you'd like, with spoiler warnings, of course. Before I close this up with final thoughts, I want to give some out-of-context notes from my readings of Become My Neighbor, as a treat for those who've stuck around. Gender. He's gender. Gender. Oh my god. Gender. Neighbor. End quote. I will say, neighbor gender envy? Yeah. In all caps, Sasha 9! There's a one-off character that looks like Sasha 9 from Psychonauts. Don't know if that was intentional, but I hope it was. I love Sasha, love Psychonauts. Glenn a little, you know. If you know, you know. Tandy gender, or an emoji. Why did I fixate on this character? I tend to fixate on one-off characters, but I'm really surprised I even remembered the name of this one. I had notes about Tillman being gender, but we already have 2 types of those notes, so... You know, something along the lines of, "Ooh, Mr. Tillman gender envy, woo!" You know, something like that. He's a furry! Sela Evangelion? If you know, you know. Won't elaborate. Channy Fitzgerald. Name of a very minor character I mentioned earlier. Thought the design was pretty. Maybe I'll make fan art of them. Who knows? Corn guy, bad. And then underneath that I added Rarold, because I forgot his name. Oops. And those are the kind of silly ones. The rest of my notes are kind of boring, just recapping the story, you know, like normal notes probably should be, but you know me, I can't be normal. Anyways, with those silly notes out of the way, let me wrap up my final thoughts. I thought this book was an enjoyable read. I finished it in about an hour and 5 minutes, and I had a blast. The characters are fun, the writing is charming, and even though I didn't think I would think about this book as in-depth as I would going into it, I feel like me thinking about it and writing the script on and off for a week has made me learn new things about it. It's definitely inspiring to me as an artist and as someone who wants to make stories and maybe comics at some point. It was really awesome to see Yugo Limbo's process over time as they worked on it. I'm not really good at giving ratings or scores, so I will be basing this off of if I would just recommend it or not. If you couldn't tell, my opinion is, if you can, you should check out this book, support the artist, and let it take you through a jolly fun adventure. Thanks for watching.